About my age group. I recently played racquetball with a fella for the first time, and he said, "You're in pretty good shape for your age." And I said, "Well, how old am I?" He said, 69. I was 59. Kevin's given me 14 minutes and 30 seconds to tell you our 35-year story of generosity. Julie and I came to marriage broke and broken on every level, in more levels than we realized, actually. The families we came from wouldn't even have been healthy enough to qualify for the Jerry Springer show. We just came from the wrong side of the tracks. We both were products of homes that ended in very vicious and violent divorces. And this was before it was cool, meaning we were kids in school, and we were some of the only kids that came from divorced homes. Back in those days, it just didn't happen. People didn't give up. We became Christians very early in our marriage. Had we not, we would have either been divorced or somebody would have ended up in jail. We were in very, very bad shape. Early on, in being Christians, we heard a message on tithing. We heard the message. We were new Christians. When you're a brand new Christian, everything the preacher says, you do. Unfortunately, that slides as we go on a little bit. But we heard this message on tithing, so we just started tithing. Tithing is nothing more than if you make $1, you give God a dime. And we began to do that. Shortly after that, I wrote down on a napkin that I wanted to give away $1 million to the kingdom of God over our working career. My wife and I were in a taco shop when I wrote that on a napkin. I spun it around and slid it across the table to her. She read it, spun it around back to me, and said, "What the heck, Mike?" She says, "We're now taking a dime out of every dollar that we make, and I need to remind you of our financial condition." She said, "Do you realize that just 2 weeks prior to this statement about giving away $1 million, that you had to chase down the mailman because you had to get to the bank before 1 o'clock, or they were going to kick us out because you had bounced so many checks?" I said, "Yes, I know that." She said, "Do you realize that a month ago you were pushing the truck and I was popping the clutch because we couldn't afford to buy a starter because we needed people to pay us?" I said, "Yeah, I remember that." And then she also reminded me that the IRS had recently levied our account because we were behind on taxes, and we were currently on credit hold with every supplier that we were doing business with because we were behind. That was where we started the journey to not only tithe, but to give away $1 million to the kingdom of God. Two people who were extremely broke in every area and very much financially broke. So we have this heart to help and give away money. Only one problem: no money. So we start helping single moms. And what we did with single moms was anything they needed. Anything practical. We would go with their children and the mothers to see the principal when the kids were in trouble. We would go to soccer games. We would buy gasoline. We started buying all the gasoline that they needed. If their car broke down, we would pay for it to get fixed. Well, we started doing this with one single mom. Here's a little secret. It works for business too. When you start meeting people's needs, they tell their friends. Before long, we had 5 single moms that we were basically pastoring and taking care of on a very, very, very practical level. Anything they needed, we did. We had, like I said, a little money, but we had a desire to help. So the business was doing a little bit better, and we started to make a little bit of profit, but not really a lot. I mean, we could help the single moms, but we were doing better, a little bit less pressure. And the single worst and best thing happened to me. I was in Santee repairing a sprinkler head, and to save time, I didn't turn the water off. Mistake number 1. And mistake number 2 was when I reached over a bush. I couldn't see it, but I knew where it was to twist it because I was saving time. The sprinkler head came off and landed in my eye. I'm now at Zion Hospital, Kaiser, and the doctor explains to me that my retina is detached. He explains to me that the way they fixed retinas back in this day was they take your eye out of your head. They put a buckle on your eye, and they put your eye back in your head, and 6 weeks later, you go back to work. So I'm now in the hospital for 2 weeks. I'm laying there because I can't move. I can't watch TV. I can't read. I can't do anything because my eye is bleeding internally. So that's the rules for me. I cannot leave my bed. I've never been real good at following rules. One day I snuck out of the bed, out of the hospital actually, and I went down behind the hospital at Kaiser, and I found the man that was in charge of the landscaping. I was in a nightgown with a patch on my eye, standing in this guy's office, explaining to him why they should hire me to take care of their landscaping. I'm quite certain if I pulled that stunt today, I would get arrested. Long story short, a number of years later, they ended up hiring us to take care of the Kaiser hospitals. It was the best guerrilla marketing I'd ever done. So we get hired to take care of the Kaiser hospitals, and we provided service for them for 23 years. And so we had an opportunity. We now were actually making some money. And we had some extremely good years where we were able to write good-sized checks because we were making money. The money was there, and we would write checks. We were able to help 3 churches in a very substantial way when we lived in Oregon. And in 2004, we moved back to San Diego, and our business was once again broke. We had experienced embezzlement. A lot of money was taken from the business. The recession was just starting. Houses were at the top of the market, and business was horrible. And I was broke. We're back at Foothills, and we're doing a building pledge, which means we're going to raise some money to build out some of these buildings. And we're broke. We have a 3-year building campaign, and it's time to give away money or make a pledge. A very interesting thing happens in our family when it's time to do this. My wife, who is a steady thinker and very normal, gets all entrepreneurial and risk-taking. I, who by nature am entrepreneurial and a risk-taker, become Chicken Little. This has been a very expensive journey. Here's what happened. We're broke. We've got a 3-year building campaign, and I think we should try to give away $30,000. My wife says that's really not showing any faith. That's not taking a chance. That's not doing anything. We finally agree that we're going to try to give away $100,000 over a 3-year period of time. I'm not in a panic, but I'm concerned because I'm broke again. The economy is getting worse every day, but I've got 3 years. Here's what happened. San Diego County caught on fire again. Kaiser Hospital freaked out and hired us to also clear weeds and brush, not only from their properties, but every property that was close to their properties. This is work we don't even do anymore. We made $50,000. I'm halfway there. Kind of hit me. I guess God's got this. And so another thing happened that involved fire. I'm watching the news one night, and the Kaiser Hospital on Otay Road is on fire. A tanker truck tipped over and caught the landscaping on fire. I was watching the news, and I was watching it burn. And I remember I said this. I said, burn, baby, burn. Because I'm thinking, the more of this stuff that burns, the more they got to pay me. And I got this building pledge I got to pay off. And plenty of it burned up. The EPA got involved, so that makes everything more expensive. I was able to pay the building pledge. But when I made the pledge, I had no money. I had been embezzled, as I said, and there was no sign that things were going to get better. Well, fast forward a couple years, and once again, we're building another building at Foothills. I think we're building out a building, and we're going to do a 1-year building campaign. Well, to me, this is pretty simple math. We had 3 years, and we did $100,000. 1 year, simple, $30,000. So I say to my wife, let's give a $30,000 pledge. And once again, she says, what are you thinking? I'm thinking survival. The economy was bad. This was the recession. We all remember that. This was the recession. Not only was I losing jobs, I was losing jobs to underbidders, but the prices that we had, our customers were forcing us to drop the prices. So this is not the time to be giving away money. At least that's what I thought. And so my wife and I are going back and forth, and again, I'm being Chicken Little, and she's being a person of faith. I thought I could outsmart her. It was a very expensive mistake. I'm on the church board. I was on the church board, so I kind of knew that we didn't think we were going to raise great amounts of money because we had just done a building pledge. So I had an idea of how much I thought we'd be able to raise. So I thought I would trick my wife. Well, I did try to trick her. And I said, let's you want to do faith, let's do faith. I'll pledge 10% of whatever the church raises. Imagine my surprise when the church raised $1.6 million. Yeah. So I have 1 year to raise to raise $160,000, and the economy the recession is full on. It's full on. 8 months into this building pledge, I have not made one payment, and I decide that I'm not going to do it. So I go down and meet with Don Bastrom, a former friend, and I say to Don, look, I don't have the money. I'm going to have to back out on my pledge. I can't make the payments. Nothing's happening. Don says, well, don't tell me, tell God. I said, what are you going to do with that? 5 years later, we made the last payment. We paid off $160,000. And at that point, we realized that we had hit our goal 35 years later, starting with the truck. I was push starting, and Julie was popping the clutch. We hit our goal to give away $1 million. We're on a mission now to tell that story, to go to other churches and tell that story and encourage particularly young business people who have their whole life ahead of them to set a goal that God can get involved with. So that's our bigger vision, what we're doing now. But I'm going to finish up here with, Kevin gave me 14 minutes and 30 seconds, remember? Oh, by the way, you know what it means when a speaker looks at their watch? Nothing. But I'll quit. I'm going to quit. I want to say to you, generosity, the generosity that changes lives, oftentimes doesn't involve money. The generosity that changes lives oftentimes doesn't involve money. The children of those single moms who we helped, we were spending minuscule amounts of money. We changed lives. And we weren't talking, that had nothing to do with money. I want to tell you about Jamal. Jamal is a 6'6" African-American young man. He moved into our house, stayed with us for 2 years, and became a son. As I mentioned, he's 6'6", African-American. My wife claims to be 5 feet tall. I think 4'11 and a half at best. I wish you could see when Julie and Jamal and Jeremy would be out doing back-to-school shopping, and people looking at Jamal, looking at Julie, and looking at Jeremy and trying to figure out what's what. And when Jamal would see people doing this, he would say this. He would say something loud. He'd say, hey, Mom, what about this? Do you think this will fit? And the people would. Jamal stayed with us for 2 years, and he became a son, as I said. He refers to us as Mom and Pop. A lot of young people refer to us as Mom and Pop because we've invested in young people. I got a text from Jamal just recently, and he said, hey, Dad. Dad is a term of endearment that kids come from bad families won't use. He said, hey, Dad. And he went on to say how much he appreciated staying with us. And then he told me this. He said, I want you to know that I never had a family before I lived with you guys. Matter of fact, he moved in at the age of 14. For his 15th birthday, we gave him a birthday party, and he told my wife that's the first birthday party he'd ever had. He came from a shattered home. So it's 7 years later, and I received this text. He says, hey, Dad, Just want to let you know, I'll be graduating from BYU University in June. I want to know will you and Mom come? And I'm not ashamed to tell you that I had tears coming down my face when I responded to Jamal. That, of course, Jamal, we will be there. And this is what he said. I want you to know I got my degree in social work. I never saw a family till I lived with you guys. And then I saw that I could help families be families, like what you had when I was with you. And I thought, and I'm crying now, I thought, we did change Jamal's life. I thought that we changed Jamal's life. But you know what really hit me? As is always the case when we help somebody else, it changed us more than it changed Jamal. I have 5 children, and they're all changing their world in a different way than what we did it, but they're changing their world. Our children got to see what happens when you bring another child into your home. And in June, Julie and I will be heading to Provo, Utah to watch Jamal graduate. It'll be one of the best days of our life, and his too. So I'll close with, we can be generous by taking an interest in other people's life. Last summer, I was at Bass Lake with Chris and Debbie George and my family. I went to get 3 cups of tea on 3 consecutive mornings, and I engaged the young gal who was working behind the counter, just talking, taking an interest, asking her questions about herself. And this is what I discovered in 3 meetings. Number 1, she's raised by a single mom because her dad had died 2 years ago of a heart attack. She lived out in the middle of nowhere on a ranch. She got kicked out of high school because they thought she was cheating. She actually wasn't cheating. She had been homeschooled, and she kept knocking out the test so well, they thought she was cheating. They bring her into the ninth grade and test her with a proficiency test. They kicked her out because she passed the 12th grade proficiency test. She was too smart for high school. So at 15 years of age, this girl is at Fresno Junior College on the soccer team. I tell you all that to tell you this. I learned all that from just asking her questions about her life. I bought 3 cups of tea, and she told me all of that. On the last day, when I went to see her and get my tea, I gave her a copy of one of the books I wrote called Giving God's Way. And in it, I wrote a little note to her, and I suggested certain books that she should read over the course of her life. She puts the book down, comes out from behind the counter, comes around the counter, and hugs me. And as I was walking back to the cabin, I thought, it's very easy to be generous with people. Just take an interest and ask them a couple of questions. And I thought, in 72 hours, this young girl is giving me a hug. We were perfect strangers 72 hours ago. And finally, I was at a meeting like this with the Building Industry Association, sitting around the table with a bunch of arrogant contractors. I'd already decided I was never going back. But the breakfast was free, so out of the corner of my eye, I see a waitress who's leaning against the wall doing her best to be invisible. And I said to myself, I bet she'd be more interesting to talk to than these guys. So I go over and talk to her. And when I walk up to her, she wouldn't look at me. She was trying to be invisible. And I'm now in her space. I asked her a couple of questions, and we talked for less than a minute. She looked up and said these words, "Thank you for talking to me." And I thought, shame on us that we would make her feel that way. But I also thought how easy it is to be generous. We can simply just ask people some questions about them, and they will talk to us. And my time is up, so I will leave you with this. This past week, one of our employees' wife, who was 32 years old, died of a heart attack. Suddenly, very suddenly. Obviously, our employee and her 2 sons are devastated, and I just want to remind us all to tell those that are important to us that we love them. And I want to remind us all to slow down when we're interacting with people and try to say a kind word, because there's a very truth to this saying that Zig Ziglar said long ago. He said, treat everybody that you come across as if they may be hurting, because they probably are. Thank you very much.